Hey all, it's Starzy and today we are here to do a book haul. Now, I don't acquire books very often. Majority of my reading is through the library, or I have been using Scribd a bit this year. Yeah, I don't actually purchase physical books very often. So this is going to be a haul for the entirety of the year 2020. And you'll see it's probably less books than a lot of people acquire in a month, but all the same. I guess we'll also see like how many of these books I've actually read coming up now to the end of the year. That's what we're doing. We're gonna go through the physical books I have. I also feel like I'm dressed kind of like traditional Christmas time cozy, which is strange for me because it's usually hot in Australia in December. It's been a weird week. Apparently it even snowed in Victoria this week. Like, I don't know what's up with that. It's supposed to be summer, but I mean, I'm not really complaining because I don't like hot weather, but that's neither here nor there. Let's look at some books. So actually, the first book that I bought in 2020 is one of the most hyped books of the year, and that is House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. The Crescent City, first book in new Crescent City series. I did read this. I have mixed feelings about it, but it's about Bryce. It's basically like urban fantasy, but in a new world kind of thing. So it's kind of like a bridge between urban fantasy and high fantasy, which I wasn't really expecting going into it. But we're following Bryce, who experiences a great tragedy and then a couple of years later is enlisted to kind of help solve a mystery. So you've got kind of you've got exploration of kind of grief and stuff in this book, as well as just like the traditional kind of fantasy story, a bit of romance, all of that. I think, I read this earlier in the year. I can't remember what month, maybe like my April wrap-ups where I talked about it. But yeah, mixed feelings. I have read it and I have it. It's probably one of the largest books I bought this year too. Alright. I also have here Cinder by Marissa Meyer. This is the first book in the Lunar Chronicles, which is a YA sci-fi series, and they're like retellings of fairy tales. This first one, Cinder, is like a Cinderella retelling, and it's also like, it's very light sci-fi. It's like space fantasy, which is the one kind of area of sci-fi I tend to enjoy. But I did actually read this series some years ago now and enjoyed it when I read it, and these are the new illustrated covers, and I just couldn't resist this cover, and I kind of like, I do want to collect all of them, but I just have this one for now. The other thing I actually really like about this copy, being the freaking nerd that I am, is was it at the back somewhere? Also, like, it's so pretty. But I'm pretty sure when I looked at this, there's like a list of discussion questions. Yeah, discussion questions. Like, discussion question 1, what parallels can you draw between Cinder and the Cinderella fairy tale? What is the symbolism behind the glass slipper, the pumpkin carriage, the ball? Is there a fairy godmother in Cinder, and if so, who is it? Like, the fact that there's a discussion guide in this, like, I don't know, I just really like that. And it kind of makes me want to reread this series, like, with people and use the discussion questions and just nerd out in that way. But yeah, it's real pretty. And I like fairy tale retellings. Another 2020 release is The Dark Tide by Alicia Jasinska, who I believe is an Australian author, which I didn't know when I bought it, although I should have, because I found this in Australian stores long before it released in America. But this is a YA fantasy, a witchy YA fantasy. In this setting, you've got like this town by the sea where the witch queen has to sacrifice someone she loves every year to kind of appease the water so that the city isn't drowned. Something along those lines. And this one, you've got some kind of twists in this story to how all of that plays out, and there is also a little bit of sapphic stuff in there. I have read this. I did really enjoy it, although I saw kind of the big thing. I saw kind of the twist at the end coming. Like, I kind of assumed that that's how things were gonna go, but I did enjoy this, and yeah, and it's pretty. Speaking of pretty books, The book that my boyfriend bought me for my birthday this year is A Sprinkle of Sorcery by Michelle Harrison. Is the sequel to A Pinch of Magic, which I've never read A Pinch of Magic, but I've read this sequel now and I really enjoyed it. But this is a children's fantasy, and we are following a group of sisters who basically go on an adventure across the sea, and you've got like pirates and witches and ghosts, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. It had all of that kind of whimsical fantasy feels that you want from this kind of children's story. And yeah, I really should go back and read the first one, but I really liked it and it's beautiful. Beautiful. The one other book that my boyfriend ended up buying me this year, mostly because I was eyeing it off when we were looking at books for my birthday, and then I ended up going, actually I really wanted that book, why didn't I ask for that? Disney and Philosophy. The Blackwell Philosophy and Pop Culture series. No, series editor William Irwin, edited by Richard B. Davis. But this has got a whole bunch of different people that have written in it, because this is essentially a collection of short essays about ideas in Disney. Anyone who doesn't know, I actually have a degree in philosophy, so it's something that really interests me. So you've got all things in here like To Be or Not to Be, The Lion King, Existentialism in Disney and Shakespeare by Megan S. Lloyd. So yeah, you've got things like that. You've got all of these little philosophical essays related to Disney in here. And this is one of those ones where, like, I've started reading it, but it's one of those ones where, because it's a collection of essays, I've just been kind of reading an essay or two here and there, so I'm just kind of slowly working my way through it. But yeah, I think the thing for me is that I feel like it's very light on the philosophy, which I guess is good from the perspective of it means like anyone could pick this up and read from it without issue. But the essays are so short and they touch on these ideas so briefly that I kind of wish there was more depth and exploration to them at times, but it's still an interesting thing and I don't regret having it. And it's also one of the prettiest books I own, like, so aesthetically pleasing. Another book that I am reading, but I'm kind of just working my way through it bits at a time, is Welcome to Country, An Introduction to Our First Peoples for Young Australians by Marsha Langton. This is, see, I'm reading it. This basically goes over Aboriginal history and culture. So there is a lot of interesting stuff in here, and I'm also just like a big advocate for the importance of people who live in Australia to know about the history and culture of the place. You know, I became a history teacher for a reason. So I think things like this are really important, and there's a lot in here that so many people just have no idea about and are just willfully ignorant of a lot of the time. I've read quite a number of things related to kind of Australian history and culture this year. I know I've talked a lot about a couple of Stan Grant books. So I think this is a really important thing. I will say this book can be a bit dry at times, like it kind of just does read a bit like a textbook, but the actual like content of it is really interesting and important, I feel. It kind of goes over a little bit of everything in here, and you've also got and you even have like images and everything, so yeah. Alright, a book that my mum gave me, or my mum bought me this year, Dystopia Utopia short stories, dark fantasy. There's a whole series of these books that I've seen at QBD, it's still got the sticker on it from QBD Books. There's a whole series of these short story collections. You've got like mythology ones, various kind of horror collections and stuff. So this is an anthology of new and classic tales. So yeah, it's a collection of short stories. You've got kind of your classic authors, but you've also got some newer authors and stuff. Even got a story by Mary Shelley. A collection of short stories. Obviously these must be to do with dystopia, utopia stuff. I haven't actually read anything from this, but I'm not mad about having it. It's real pretty. I just don't tend to read short stories very often, so that's really the main reason I haven't got to any of this yet. Hopefully I will peruse through it at some point. I think the thing about short story collections is I only want to read like one or two at a time, but I feel a lot better about completing a book, and I feel more accomplished that way. I think that's one of the weird things that kind of keep me from reading short stories very often, where I'm not going to get that satisfaction of completing a whole book, even though it is a whole story. I don't know. It's a weird thing. I don't know if anyone else experiences stuff like that. Right, that's pretty much all of the fiction I have. Then I have a few more non-fiction things. So I have the little book of big plants. Bring the outside in with over 45 friendly giants. So if you've seen some of my vlogs, you might have seen that I did get a couple of plants this year, mostly a lavender plant. And you know, it's not dead yet, so I've been looking at other plants. I don't know, this book's real pretty, and it does just kind of go over various plants and a little bit about them and care of them. The only thing is that I have a cat, of course, and there aren't many plants that are completely non-toxic, but still, nice little book to have about plants. Then I have 2 witchcraft books. So I showed this in my last wrap up because I have read it. Wiccan Kitchen, A Guide to Magical Cooking and Recipes. Kitchen Witchcraft, real pretty book. Yeah, it's just pretty. It's pretty, and I have read it. Then this one I am currently reading, and this is Green Witchcraft, A Practical Guide to Discovering the Magic of Plants, Herbs, Crystals, and Beyond by Paige Vanderbeck. And this is like a beginner's green witchcraft book, which at this point I've read so many beginner's books, including ones about green witchcraft, that it's a bit like, why? But I didn't actually have any of them, like I didn't actually own any of them. So I still think this is a nice one to have, and yeah. So I obtained 10 books this year, and of those 10 books, of those I have read 6 of them, because I have also read through the plants one. I've read 6 out of the 10. I am partway through 3 of them, which means the only book that I haven't opened at all is the Dystopia Utopia short stories one. So really, I think I'm doing pretty good in actually reading the books that I am physically obtaining. We won't talk about like my pre-existing physical TBR because I've barely touched that shelf this year, which is a whole nother issue and something I really need to get to next year. There are books that have been on there for so long that I need to read. But yeah, those are the 10 books that I acquired in 2020. What's your favorite book that you obtained this year, maybe? Have you read these? What did you think of them? And yeah, as always, let's talk books in the comments. I will say, a book I really want to get my hands on because you know, my favorite book I read this year, how many times I'm going to talk about it, but friggin' Bunny by Mona Awad. I really want to get a copy of that, but my 2 issues are, 1, I like the American cover much better than the ones that I can easily get my hands on because the American one's like pink, and I like pink's my favorite color. And 2, just adult books in Australia in general can be real expensive, which is why I don't purchase books very often, because books here are expensive. Anyway, that's it. They're the books I have. Stay safe. Starzy out.